3 verses. Theragatha. Adapted from the archaic translation by Mrs. Rhys Davids. Another Sama, daughter of a clansman of Kosambi. She also, accumulating good merit like the previous, was born, in the time of Vipassi Buddha, as a fairy on the banks of the river Chandabhaga. Living life as fairy, she saw one day the master walking on the bank, that he might sow the good seed among creatures. And with great glee she worshipped, offering flowers. For this she gained rebirth among gods and men, till, in this Buddha period, she took birth in a clansman's family at Kosambi. She too became the friend of Samavati, and she too, out of grief at the death of the latter, entered the order. She too could not gain self-mastery for 25 years. Till in her old age she heard a timely sermon, through which her insight meditation progressed and she won arahantship, with thorough grasp of the Dhamma in form and meaning. On that looking back, she broke forth. Full 25 years since I was ordained. But in my troubled mind in no way yet could I obtain the equanimity, the peace of mind, the governance of thoughts. Long tried to obtain, I found not. And then with torrents of thrill, I dwelt in discipline of the conqueror. Freed myself from all suffering. I strove without sloth, and won. Craving is dead, and Buddha's discipline is fulfilled. Today is now the 7th day since I withered up within that ancient craving. Theragatha. Adapted from the archaic translation by Mrs. Rhys Davids. Uttama, daughter of a millionaire of Samavati, disciple of Patichara. She, too, accumulating good merit under former Buddhas, was in the time of Vipassi Buddha, born at Bandhamati, in the house of a certain wealthy landowner, and became a domestic servant. Grown up, she tended her master's household. Now, at that time, King Banduma, having restored fast-keeping, gave gifts before dining and, after dining, attended a sermon. And the people, following his pious example, and keeping fast, the slave thought, "Why should not I, too, do as they all are doing?" And for the thoroughness of her observance of the feasts she was reborn among the 33 gods. And in other happy realms, and finally, in this Buddha era, in the house of a millionaire of Samavati. Come to years of discretion, she heard Patichara preach, and entered the order. But she was unable to progress in the insight meditation till Patichara, seeing the state of her mind, gave her admonition. By that established, she won arahantship, with thorough grasp of the Dhamma in true form and in meaning. And looking back at that, she blissfully said thus: 4 times, no, 5, I moved swiftly from my cell, and roamed around to find the peace of mind. Long vainly tried to obtain the governance of thoughts. I could not bring into captivity. To me she came, that noble bhikkhuni, who was my foster mother in the faith. She taught to me the Dhamma, in which I learnt the nature of this transitory self. And well I minded all, even as she taught. For 7 days I sat in jhana joy and ease, cross-legged. On the 8th day at last, I stretched my limbs, and went my way serene. For I had burst asunder the surrounding gloom. Now, this was the affirmation of her Anna. Theragatha. Adapted from the archaic translation by Mrs. Rhys Davids. Another Uttama, daughter of a Kosalan Brahmin. She, too, having made her resolve under former Buddhas, and accumulating good karma of age-enduring efficacy in many rebirths, was born, in the time of Vipassi Buddha, as a domestic servant, at Bandhamati. One day, seeing an arahant of the master's order seeking alms, she gladly offered him 3 sweet cakes. Through this she was reborn in happy states many times. She finally came to birth, in this Buddha era, in the family of an eminent Brahmin in the country of Kosala. Come to years of discretion. She heard the master preach while touring in the country, and leaving the world, she soon won arahantship, together with thorough grasp of the Dhamma in true form and in meaning. And looking back at that, she blissfully spoke thus. The 7 factors of the awakened mind. 7 ways by which we may nibbana win. All have I developed and made ripe. Even according to the Buddha's word. Fulfilled is the desire. I win the void. I understand the causation. Buddha's daughter I. Born of his mouth, his blessed word, I stand. Transported with Nibbana's bliss always. And all the sense desires that fetter gods, that hinder men, are fully driven off. Abolished is the infinite round of births. Becoming comes never again for me. Therigatha. Adapted from the archaic translation by Mrs. Rhys Davids. Dantika, daughter of a Brahmin priest to the king of Kosala, Savathi. She, too, having made her resolve under former Buddhas, and in this and that rebirth accumulating good karma of age-enduring efficacy in many rebirths, was born, when the world was empty of a Buddha, as a fairy by the river Chandabhaga. Sporting one day with the fairies, and straying a while, she saw a silent Buddha seated at the foot of a tree, and adored him in faith with flower offerings. For this she was reborn among gods and men, and, finally, in this Buddha era, at Savathi, in the house of the king's priest Brahman. Come to years of discretion, she became a lay believer in the Jetavana grove, and, later, entered the order under great Pajapati the Gotami, foster mother of Buddha as well as head of Nuns order. And one day, while staying at Rajagaha, she ascended the Vulture's Peak. After her meal, and while resting, she saw a tame elephant stretching forth its foot when instructed by its trainer. Seeing this, her insight meditation grew, by which she won arahantship, with thorough grasp of the Dhamma in true form and in meaning. And afterwards, thrilled with happiness at the thought of her attainment, she blissfully said thus. Coming from noonday rest on Vulture's Peak, I saw an elephant, his bath performed, came forth from the river, and a man taking his goad, instructed the great creature to stretch his foot. Give me your foot. The elephant obeyed, and to his neck the driver sprang up. I saw the untamed tamed, I saw him bent to master's will, and noticing inwardly, I passed into the forest depths to meditate, and there I won over the mind experiencing trance. Therigatha. Adapted from the archaic translation by Mrs. Rhys Davids. Ubiri, daughter of a great elite of Savathi, wife of the king. She too, having made her resolve in the time of former Buddhas, and accumulating, in this and that rebirth, good merit valid for an eon of evolution, was reborn, in the time of Padumuttara Buddha, at the town of Hansavati in a clansman's house. Come to years of discretion, she was left alone one day, her parents being engaged with a party in the inner court of the house. And seeing an arahant approaching the house door, she asked him, "Come in here, Lord," and did him homage, showing him to a seat. She then took his bowl and filled it with food. The elder thanked her, and departed. Then she was reborn therefore in the heaven of the 33 gods, enjoying there a heavenly time and many a happy life. From that time on, she was, in this Buddha era, reborn at Savathi in the family of a very eminent elite. And she was beautiful to see, and was brought into the house of the king of Kosala himself. After a few years a daughter was born to her, whom she named Jiva. The king saw the child, and was so pleased that he had Ubiri anointed as queen. But later on the little girl died, and the mother went daily mourning to the charnel field. And one day she went and worshipped the master, and sat down. But soon she left, and stood lamenting by the river Akiravati. Then the master, seeing her from afar, revealed himself as an ethereal figure projected from his fragrant chamber, and asked her, "Why do you weep?" She said, "I weep because of my daughter, Bhagwa." Buddha said, "Burnt in this cemetery are some of your daughters. For which of them do you weep?" And pointing out the place where this one and that one had been laid, he said half the saying, "O Ubiri, who wails in the wood, crying, O Jiva, O my daughter dear." Single quote. "Come to yourself. Lo, in this burying ground are burnt full many 1,000 daughters dear, and all of them were named like unto her. Now which of all those jivas do you mourn?" And she pondered with intelligence on the Dhamma thus taught by the master, and so stirred up in insight meditation that, by the virtue of his teaching and her own attainment of the insight meditation, she reached the topmost fruit, even arahantship. And showing forth the high distinction she had won, she spoke the second half of the hymn. Lo! From my heart the hidden shaft is gone. The shaft that nestled there has he removed. And that consuming grief for my dead child, which poisoned all the life of me, is dead. Today my heart is healed, my yearning stayed, and all within is purity and peace. I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma and to the Sangha. Theragatha. Adapted from the archaic translation by Mrs. Rhys Davids. Sukha, daughter of a great elite of Rajagaha, pupil of Dharmadina, distinguished as preacher. She, too, having lived in the past as the previous Teres, was born in a clansman's house. Come to years of discretion, she went with lay women disciples to the Vihara, and heard the master preach. Becoming a believer, she renounced the world and became learned, proficient in the doctrine, and a ready speaker. Leading for centuries a holy life of sexual abstinence, she yet died a worldling at heart, and was reborn in the heaven of bliss. Again, when Vipassi was Buddha, and again when Vesabu was Buddha, she kept the moral precepts, and was learned and proficient in doctrine. Again, when Kakasanda was Buddha, and yet again when Kanagamana was Buddha, she became recluse, and was pure in conduct, learned, and a preacher. At length, she was, in this Buddha era, reborn at Rajagaha, in the family of an eminent elite, and called Sukha. Come to years of discretion, she found faith in the master at her own home, and became a lay disciple. But later, when she heard Dharmadina preach, she was very inspired, and renounced the world under her. And performing the exercises of insight meditation, she not long after attained arahantship, together with thorough grasp of the Dhamma in true form and in meaning. Upon that, attended by bhikkhunis, she became a great preacher. And one day, when they had been into Rajagaha for alms, and had returned and dined, they entered the bhikkhunis' settlement. And Sukha, with a great company seated around her, taught the doctrine in such wise that she seemed to be giving them sweet honey to drink and sprinkling them with ambrosia. And they all listened to her with rapt attention, motionless, intent. Upon that the god dwelling the tree that stood at the end of the nuns' terrace was inspired by her teaching, and went out to Rajagaha, walking about the ways and the squares proclaiming her excellence, and saying, What would you men of Rajagaha have? What have you done? That mute and idle here. You lie about, as if bemused with wine, nor wait upon succor, while she reveals the precious teaching that the Buddha taught. The wise, I think, were glad to drink that life's elixir, once won never lost, that wells ever up in her sweet words, even as the wayfarer welcomes the rain. And hearing what the tree spirit said, the people were inspired, and came to the Teri and listened attentively. At a later period, when the Teri, at the end of her life, was completing her nibbana, and wished to show how the system she had taught led to salvation, she declared her Anna thus: O child of light, by light of Dhamma, set free from cravings dire, firm, self-controlled, serene. Bear to this end your last mortal frame, for you have conquered Mara and his host. Theragatha. Adapted from the archaic translation by Mrs. Rhys Davids. Sela, the Alavican, daughter of the king of Alavi. She, too, having lived in the past as the previous Teris, was born in a clansman's house at Hansavati, and was given in marriage by her parents to a clansman's son of equal birth. With him she lived happily till his death. Then, being herself advanced in years, and growing anxious as she searched to find good destination, she went about from place to place, from vihara to vihara, with the intention of learning from teachers of religion. Then one day she came up to the Bodhi tree of the Master and sat down, thinking, if a Buddha, and Bhagwa, be unequaled and matchless among men, may this one show me the miracle of Buddhahood. Scarce had the thought arisen when the tree blazed forth, the branches appeared as if made of gold, the horizon shone all around. And she, inspired at that sight, fell down and worshipped, and for 7 days sat there. On the 7th day she performed a grand feast of offering and worship to the Buddha. By this meritorious karma she was reborn in this Buddha era, in the kingdom of Alavi, as the king's daughter, and named Sela. But she was also known as the Alavican. When she came to years of discretion, her father became disciple of the master, he was also ordained, and went with him to the city of Alavi. Sela, being yet unmarried, went with the king and heard the master preach. She became a believer and a lay disciple. Afterwards, when currents of awakening started within, she became ordained, worked her way in insight meditation, and because of the promise in her and the maturity of her knowledge, she, crushing the sankharas of thought, word and deed, soon won arahantship. From that time on, as an elder, she lived at Savathi. And one day she went forth from Savathi to meditate in the dark grove, and sat down beneath a tree. Then Mara, alone and wishing to interrupt her seclusion, approached in the guise of a stranger, saying, Never shall you find escape while in the world. What profits you then your loneliness? Take the good things of life while yet you may. Repentance else too late awaits you. Then the Teri thinking, Verily, it is that foolish Mara who would deny me the nibbana that is revealed to me, and asks me to choose the sensuous life. He knows not that I am an arahant. Now will I tell him and confound him. Recited the following. Like spears and javelins are the joys of sense, that pierce and tear apart the mortal frames of us. These that you call the good things of life, good of that class to me is nothing worth. In every way the love of pleasure is removed, and the part of ignorance within is removed. Know this, O evil one, hence. Here, O destroyer, you shall not prevail. Theragatha. Adapted from the archaic translation by Mrs. Rhys Davids. Soma, daughter of a Brahmin, priest to the king of Magadha. She, too, having lived in the past as the previous Teres, was, in the time of Sikhi Buddha, reborn in the family of an eminent noble, and, when grown up, was made the chief wife of the king Aranava. The story of her past is similar to that of Teri Abhaya. The story of her present is that, in this Buddha era, she was reborn as the daughter of the priest of King Bimbisara at Rajagaha, and named Soma. Come to years of discretion, she came to believe in the Master in her own home, and became a lay disciple. And later on, self-compelled, she entered the order of Bhikkhunis, and, working her way in insight meditation, she not long after won arahantship, with thorough grasp of the Dhamma in letter and in spirit. Then, dwelling at Savatthi in the bliss of enlightenment, she went forth one day meditate in the dark grove, and sat down beneath a tree. And Mara, alone, and wishing to interrupt her with lust, approached her, invisible and in the air, saying, "That vantage ground the sages may attain is hard to reach with her two-finger consciousness. That is no woman competent to gain. For women, from the age of 7 or 8, boiling rice at all times, know not the moment when the rice is cooked, but must take some grains in a spoon and press it with 2 fingers. Hence the expression, 2-finger, sense." Then the elder rebuked Mara. "How should the woman's nature hinder us, whose minds are firmly set, who ever move with growing knowledge onward in the path? What can that signify to one in whom insight does truly comprehend the Dhamma? In every way the love of pleasure is removed, and the part of ignorance within is removed. Know this, O evil one, hence. Here, O destroyer, you shall not prevail."